What's going on, everybody? I hope you're having a great day today. This is Alex from the Fresh Fantasy Podcast, and this is the 8th episode of Season 3. Today, we're going to be talking about bold predictions, putting some spice on some of our favorite takes and giving our reasoning why we believe they will happen. Some of the guys we'll be talking about today include Travis Etienne, Jalen Waddle, Skye Moore, Allen Robinson, and why we may be extra high or extra low on them. Joining me today to break this all down is a returning guest on the podcast who is so phenomenal with his bold predictions last year that I had no choice but to bring him back. He is the author of the best-selling Fantasy Football Black Book and is the host of the best fantasy podcast on the planet, the FantasyPros Football Podcast. The dad to two adorable daughters, including a flag football superstar in the making. With over 23,000 followers, he is Fantasy Pros Joe Pisapia. How are we feeling today?
Feeling good. It was a good weekend of flag football, I will tell you that. I might have had my proudest moment as a coaching dad ever. It's one thing, she's playing against in the all girls league on Friday nights, but she also plays against the boys in the co-ed league. And there's only 2 girls this year playing in the co-ed league.
Wow.
And, I had my daughter playing linebacker. I told her, this is the thing when you're coaching the boys and the girls, Alex, it's very different.
Yeah.
The girls, they do exactly what you tell them to do. They're completely focused. The boys are spacing out. They're looking at the other field. They're touching the grass. It's crazy. I told her, I said, look, in this play, instead of going up front, drop back 3 steps, move to the left. She dropped back 3 steps, move to the left, intercepts the ball, runs it, takes it to the house for a touchdown. You should have seen the look on the boys' faces. You should have heard all the moms on the sidelines going crazy. It was a sight to behold. It was pretty fun. So flag football season's going well. I'm glad we're made it to season 3 here on your show. That's very exciting. I heard at the end of season 3, there's like a cliffhanger. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that is. Hopefully everybody makes it out alive, but I'm grateful to be here talking football with you, man. Again, this is fun.
Definitely. Absolutely. And it's always fun. Like we talked about last time, talking bold predictions and, putting a little spice in some of our favorite takes. And I think that the beautiful thing about fantasy football is that you can have a bold prediction about just about anything. And I think you can make a case for so many things, but I think these are things that we talked a little bit about before the show that we truly believe in and believe are going to happen. And real quick, before we get into them, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we won't go through all of them, that me and you we're feeling pretty good about our bold predictions last year. I'll name a couple here. You had that Jeff Wilson would have more fantasy points than Raheem Mostert. I mean, like, how on
I just hated Mostert. I just knew Mostert wasn't the guy in the backfield because he was always going to get hurt. So I'm not no victory laps on that one.
Exactly. No, there's not. But I think that the biggest one that for us that we talked about and that you agreed with, I mean, I had James Conner finishing as an RB1. You were right there with me agreeing with that one. I think you also had Kyle Pitts as a top 5 tight end last year. I mean, we were feeling a lot of pretty good, and hopefully we'll continue to do more of the same. But as always, Fantasyland is going to be all over the place. But let's start with you for bold predictions today. What is your first bold prediction? And one thing I will say, we will get spicier and spicier as the show goes on, leading up to our spiciest take of them all.
Yes, and we also discussed the demise of Ezekiel Elliott, which I was in the vast minority of and took a lot of heat and a lot of spice from a lot of people, especially Cowboys fans. But at the end of the day, I know he finished as an RB1, but it was the ugly RB1, wasn't it? At the end of the day, it was a circumstantial RB1. So, sometimes you gotta open your mind up. And I think what's fun about these, and we were talking before the show too, is that these are more to open your mind about the range of outcomes.
Yes.
Because so many players have different ranges of outcomes, and it's good to sometimes open your mind up to some that maybe you didn't think about, or maybe you think, or are possible in a certain vein. And I'm going to start with one that I think is very possible. In Minnesota, Adam Thielen's been a wonderful story, undrafted free agent, hell of a football player, tough as nails guy. He's had a lot of tread on the tires. He's a little older. He's been dealing with some injuries. We can say he's touchdown dependent. I think that's always a cop-out. Guys who catch touchdowns are good players for the most part. They do it consistently because they have the confidence of the quarterback in the red zone. So that's a good thing. But I think this is a year where I think KJ Osborne might finish with more receptions than Adam Thielen. And I think that's possible for 2 reasons. Number 1, the age of Thielen, and number 2, the injury history. I think those 2 things, and looking at when KJ Osborne last year got the opportunity when Thielen wasn't around or would get 7 to 9 targets, Osborne caught everything pretty much. I mean, Osborne was a machine. And when you have a true alpha like a Justin Jefferson there, I think that gives you the opportunity to work in single coverage. It's what's probably propped up Adam Thielen towards the end of his career a little bit here. But I do think we're nearing the end. The fact that they didn't go out there in the offseason really make any splashes at the wide receiver position or in the draft, to me, this kind of really solidifies that KJ Osborne is a piece of that puzzle that I think is going to be very useful for them. So that's my first, that's your mild spice take, but I think it's a very possible one. And I think late Osborne's a guy going to have on a lot of benches on a lot of teams this year.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Do you think that he could potentially be like the Vikings version of maybe like Van Jefferson, comparatively with Kevin O'Connell coming from the Rams to the Vikings? Like, do you think he could be, a similar deep threat that has some big games throughout the season like Van Jefferson? Or do you think he's just straight up better than that?
I think it could be more like the Rams version of Odell Beckham Jr. in the second half. I think it's more like that, because whenever you have that wide receiver that takes up so much attention, like a Cooper Kupp or like a Jefferson, you're going to have you're not going to get safety help. You're going to have, typically mismatches on linebackers, depending on what formation you're in. But Osborne is a guy that last year proved that if you're going to throw him the football, he's going to catch the football. He's going to show up in those big spots. And I think that we just have to understand that all good things come to an end, unfortunately. And it's always better to be proactive than reactive with older players. It's kind of the same thought process of Zeke, 6 years in the league, so much tread on the tires, the age, the mileage, all of those things. Eventually they all come back to earth. And I feel like Thielen's that next guy where, it was another good season, but how many more ahead of him? And I think it's time to start looking to the future. And I think Osborne, at least in the short term, has an opportunity for that.
Yep, exactly. I think the opportunity is absolutely there. I think as a fan, I sort of hope you're wrong. Maybe not as a fantasy football person. I mean, I love Adam Thielen. I love his story. I love how he's been able to do it. But obviously, injuries have bit him in the butt. He is getting a little bit older. But I hope that he finds a way. But I think that KJ Osborne is the perfect opportunity to do exactly what you said. And speaking of perfect opportunity, how about Travis Etienne? I think that Travis Etienne is going to outscore both Josh Jacobs and Antonio Gibson. Etienne is the FantasyPros consensus running back 24. Josh Jacobs is running back 20. Antonio Gibson running back 15. There's 87 running back targets from Jacksonville last year that are injured or gone. James Robinson being the injured targets. Travis Etienne obviously is familiar with Trevor Lawrence playing together at Clemson. And the biggest thing is the draft for Etienne that really, solidified to me that I think that he's going to come out healthy, because James Robinson's coming off a torn Achilles, and the only other competition he has is 5th round running back Snoop Cooper. I know that Etienne is coming off a Lisfranc injury, but I think they would have invested a little bit more draft capital or maybe re-signed someone like Carlos Hyde if they really believe that, Travis Etienne was not going to come out healthy this year. I think Doug Peterson's also better than Urban Meyer. And not to mention, one thing that nobody's really talking about with Etienne, that they added probably the best guard in the league for run blocking in Brandon Scherf. So I think big things are coming for Etienne this year. Are you feeling the same way, or does the Lisfranc injury scare you a little bit?
Well, the Lisfranc injury should always scare you a little bit, but you hope that he's had enough time to heal. It's been, coming up on, what was it? He got hurt in August, I believe it was, right? It was the beginning of August, very beginning. So, we're getting closer to that year. But look, he's a younger guy. He's great talent. Trevor Lawrence has the history with him too, which I think is a very important thing. Chemistry is very important. Anybody's an upgrade from Urban Meyer. I don't love Doug Peterson, but I mean, Urban Meyer is a hot mess, but Etienne was a player I was very excited about last year, and I had as a flex RB in a lot of spots. And when he got hurt, it crushed me in a couple formats, and it was a little frustrating, but I would buy back in. I think you make a great point with Scherf, that addition too. I think that just the fact, I think they were so underprepared in terms of game plan last year. It was so obviously so. I mean, Urban Meyer just was completely out of his depth, and it's an unfortunate set of circumstances for Lawrence. So I think the Jaguars have nowhere to go but up. And I think Etienne is one of these players that some people, especially the casual football fans, will almost forget about. And because he's on a bad team and they haven't seen him play, a lot of people don't watch college football. They really will. He'll drop in drafts maybe further than he should. But then stupid people like me will be hyping him up and probably change that by the time we get into, right in the early September draft, right before. By that time, he'll probably go up. But now is a good time in those early drafts and the best ball drafts to get your shares of him, because I do think there's huge upside there.
Definitely. And I think that off of that, like you're right, I think that guys like Antonio Gibson, I think will continue to drop. I mean, a little bit. I think Josh Jacobs is still a pretty good value at running back 20 right now for his potential role, but we'll see on that. But this take is about Travis Etienne. I think Travis Etienne has wild potential for next year, but let's turn up the heat a little bit onto your second bold prediction.
All right, second bold prediction. Here we go. Michael Thomas finishes ahead of A.J. Brown in half-point PPR. So
Wow.
here is the reasoning for this. Money talks at the end of the day. A.J. Brown got his money, and now he's working with, let's be honest, he's working with a quarterback that still has shortcomings. Jalen Hurts is a great fantasy quarterback, but in terms of real quarterback play, there's some deficits there. And there's every opportunity that he could move past that. But this is not a prolific passing offense. And we could blame it all we want on Jalen Reagor and say that, that they haven't drafted wide receivers very well, or a million different things, right? That you could talk about. At the end of the day, it still hangs on the quarterback. And as much as I love AJ Brown as a talent, AJ Brown has had some injuries he's dealt with. AJ Brown absolutely is the kind of receiver that can make I would say a quarterback like Hurts better with the run after the catch stuff that he can do. But
Yep.
at the same time, let's not forget how prolific Michael Thomas can be. And let's not forget how much Jameis Winston likes to throw the football. So I think that combination, especially now that Olave is there too, if everything stays intact, I think there's a good chance that Thomas propels himself back into that top 10 conversation. And I think Brown is going to be right on that fringe because of the offense and just the way they operate. I don't see all of a sudden them becoming a prolific passing offense, the Eagles. I like their draft. I think Howie Roseman did a really good job in this draft, especially on the defensive side of the football. But Michael Thomas has one more shot to get paid, and I think you're going to see him do that. And whatever was going on there with him and Sean Payton, whatever was going on there, unfortunately, he's going to have to put it all aside and go out there and perform. Otherwise, that contract ain't coming.
100%. I actually wanted to disagree with you. I wanted to say Joe, but like the Titans are always in the bottom of like the pass attempts in the league. Like he's going to a higher pass volume offense, and that was not the case last year. Tennessee was actually at 2 more pass attempts per game than Philadelphia did. Now he gets a quarterback downgrade, competing with an ascending, Devonte Smith. It's not just him. I still love AJ Brown, but not as much as I love Michael Thomas. I think I'm a little bit worried about, what is this guy going to look like on the field? Is his ankle actually healthy? You know what I mean? Because it's been so long. There's been surgeries and issues and everything under the sun with that. They did draft Chris Olave, which I think will be a good compliment to Thomas. But I think if Thomas is still the guy that we all think he's going to be, I think that's a fair take. But I'm curious to see what he looks like, though, coming off injury, because it's not like he's a spring chicken anymore. He's going to be 29 this year. So
yeah, but this is it. And so this is the fork in the road. 29, maybe you got 2 or 3 more years left. Can you have that one big season and get your money? I think these guys tend to show up in those moments. I do. And to the point too, you're talking about Tennessee, that number is greatly skewed too, because all the injuries they had, they didn't throw the ball very much. And and then when Derrick Henry got hurt, they couldn't do anything. Julio Jones missed almost all the season. AJ Brown was hurt a lot. Some of those guys, Nick Westbrook-Akinye, and these guys were picking up off the waiver wire. We're like, who are these guys that are trying to throw the ball? So the fact that Tennessee, we all know how terrible they were in that wide receiving core, and they were still better than the Eagles. What does that say about the Eagles? That's the thing to take away from that.
And not only that, but the Eagles were at 29 pass attempts per game last year. That's going to be scary when it's not Russell Wilson targets 29 pass attempts per game.
No. And AJ Brown has totally been the efficiency monster.
Yep.
But he's going to have to do it again. And I think that's one of those things where I'm not saying he's not a wide receiver 1. I'm just saying if I had my druthers right now, you're getting one guy at wide receiver 11, the other guy at wide receiver 20. I'll take my shot with Michael Thomas.
Yep, I think that's a fair point. But I am in the part of the Jalen Hurts train. I think that he's going to improve a little bit, but not enough to take him over Michael Thomas, and that will be that. But my next take is a tight end, and I know I got hate for this one last year. I got so much hate for my tight end take last year, and it was Robert Tonyan. This year, I'm going after Dawson Knox. I think Dawson Knox will be outside the top 15 tight ends. He was 20th in tight end targets last year at just 4.7 per game. I know that he caught so many touchdowns, but he was just 22nd in target share, 13% target share. Like, do you really want to be investing in that as a top 5 tight end, a top 8 tight end? But the biggest thing, and this is the same conversation that we had about Tonyan, Dawson Knox caught a touchdown on 18% of his catches. That's almost 1 of every 5 catches this man was in the end zone. I know that his red zone target share is a little better, but do we really expect this guy to get that many touchdowns this year? And I know that's not how we're drafting him, but I think regression is going to come. I like the retool that they have, in Jamison Crowder. I think Gabriel Davis will take a step forward. I like the pick of Shakir, the guy that they got in the
Yeah, I
fifth
like
round.
Shakir a
I
lot.
think that
I
they
like
have a lot of
Shakir.
good pieces, and I think that with also adding James Cook, who I think is the best pass-catching running back in the draft, it's going to take away a little bit from Dawson Knox, and I think that he's going to fall out of the top 15 because touchdown regression is going to bite him in the butt.
Alex Caruso annually taking down a tight end. I like this. This has become your thing now. Every year you got to find another tight end to take down. And this is why I always say, just go get a free one. I mean,
Yeah.
I got free Dalton Schultz a few years ago. I had a lot of free Dawson Knox last year. Free tight ends pop up all the time. Every single year there's a free tight end. The worst thing you can do, I always say, is spend draft capital in that middle. If you're going to go up to get a Pitts or an Andrews or a Kelsey, okay. Kittle still scares the crap out of me because he's never healthy. But it's that middle of tight end I think will crush you because you're missing out on wide receiver and running back depth, or missing out on some of those top tier quarterbacks. That to me, just there's no reason to do that. Just wait till the end, take a couple shots on a few guys, and hopefully you hit on one. It's a very easy thing to do, and then you can just churn and burn them. If the guys who don't work out, just drop them and then move on.
Yeah, and I think that to put it another way, I'd take Cole Kmet straight up right now over Dawson Knox. I think that he had over right around
as a talent 100%.
As a talent
100%.
Yeah, but I would also take the situation. I mean, like Chicago added Velus Jones, who was a 6-year college football player and had one good season. Like I think that Cole Kmet could easily hit well over 100 targets again, and they lost their 3rd, 4th, and 5th leading target getters last year. It's going to be the Darnell Mooney show, but outside of that, he's going to have no one to throw to but Kmet. I think that he's going to step it up this year. But Joe, there's another player, another quarterback that you have stepping it up. Please tell us about him and why he will have a really great year this year.
Well, this is number 3, so this is in the mid-range spicy.
Of course.
But honestly, in my opinion, I think it's almost mild because he threw for 4,800 yards last year. So why can't he throw for 5,000 this year? And it's Derek Carr. And let's give him 35 touchdowns on top of it. He had just 23 last year. Do you know how many times guys throw for almost 5,000 yards and have just 23 touchdowns? Never. It never happens, okay? It is complete lunacy that this happened, and it comes down to their efficiency in the red zone. Now, that certainly fell apart when Darren Waller was out because Darren Waller was their red zone machine. And Hunter Renfrow is still a really good player. Hunter Renfrow is going to eat in this offense. Do not let anybody tell you that Hunter Renfrow is going to fall apart and be nothing, because that's not how Josh McDaniels runs an offense. I saw it run with Wes Welker and Randy Moss for many years in New England. Trust me, it's going to be fine. Okay. These guys can coexist with Devonte Adams being there now. And Adams is such a red zone monster in that short area where with the moves he has, the basketball type moves where he can get in there and space a guy and then catch a football and then make a move and he's in the end zone. To me, when you're adding in a player that you already have a built-in rapport with, already have a comfort level with between the two guys, that is everything. The chemistry between these guys, carrying over from college, it does matter. And it matters in a big way. And when you put an offensive-minded coach here like Josh McDaniels, and then you have Derek Carr, who is, I think, an undervalued, underappreciated asset right now. I went from a place years ago where I thought Carr was overrated to now I feel like he's underrated. He doesn't get enough credit for what he's done and what he's overcome in a weird regime that saw a lot of weird stuff between the Gruden stuff, between the Henry Ruggs stuff. That team got in the playoffs, okay? Yep. And that team rallied around their quarterback and rallied around the coach at the time, Brashia. And I think that when you're adding in a weapon like Devonte Adams, who I do not think is done at all, I think you are in a really interesting spot here where all he has to do is pretty much do what he did last year. And I think that touchdown total is going to improve significantly. And it's just, you're adding Devonte Adams. You're adding one of the top 3 wide receivers in the league to an offense that's already got a few other good pieces. I don't see how that touchdown total does not go over. And look, from a running game scenario, and you think about who they have to play every week, they're going to be in a lot of games where they're going to continuously have to go and just back and forth, exchanging blows with Justin Herbert, exchanging blows with Patrick Mahomes, with Russell Wilson. This is going to be a very competitive division. They're going to have to keep scoring just to win games, and it's going to be a fascinating thing to watch.
And I agree. And I don't think their defense was that amazing last year. And with their not having draft picks, giving up Devonte Adams, their defense is not going to be, much better.
You're right.
And especially not only that, but playing in the division that they do where, one team got a new, top quarterback in the NFL. The other teams are reloading with new pass catchers, like we'll mention later. But I think things are interesting. Derek Carr, that's a great name. I think when you add the best wide receiver in the entire NFL to any offense, let alone that one that has like an ascending player, in Darren Waller and another ascending player in Hunter Renfrow, who I really believe in. I agree. I think that Josh McDaniels has been around a lot of talent and how to divide up these super offenses we've seen in New England year after year and, finding ways for everybody to get theirs. I mean, I want to disagree with you here and have something to, fight about and, go back and forth about, but I really can't here because I really, really believe in Derek Carr. I think that he is also underrated, and I think a lot of big things are going to be coming for him this year. But do you think, and let me just ask you real quick before we move on, do you think there's any chance, like I know that Devonte Adams and Derek Carr played together, but do you think there could be any little bit of a slow start, to get off the season with a new coach, new players, or do you think that these guys are professionals, they're the best at what they do, and that they're going to come in firing right away?
Veterans, no. I'm not worried about veterans like that because I think they're going to know what to do. They know each other's tendencies already. And when a player like Adams says, I want to go here and play with that guy after playing with Aaron Rodgers, I think that says a lot about the confidence that they have that they're going to be able to put it all together. So I think it's going to be something that actually clicks right away, as opposed to whenever you have young players coming in with a veteran quarterback. That's going to be trickier. Like I look at Green Bay and I say to myself, all right, well, you're telling me that the first time that Christian Watson drops a ball, Aaron Rodgers isn't going to roll his eyes and throw his hands up in the air and throw him under the bus and then feel confident to go back to him. That's a tough sell for me. Like it just is. I've watched enough Aaron Rodgers in my life to know how miserable that guy can get on the field at times when there's failure. That to me is a confidence, dropper. I look at the opportunity here with Adams and Carr, and I think that these guys have confidence in each other, and I think they're only going to build. And I think the biggest loser could potentially be Darren Waller from this group, not Hunter Renfrow. I just don't see the offense running that way. And if you want to keep Waller upright, you're going to have to trim him back a lot because people forget he's a little older. Just because he's new to us, he ain't new to football. He's been around a long time. He just never really cracked through because of his personal issues. So, he is not as young as you might think he is. Go look. I think he's 29, turning 30, I believe, if memory serves.
Supposed to be 30, you're right. Exactly. And I think beyond that, I agree. And I think we've seen it back-to-back seasons where people were fading Matthew Stafford a little bit, fading Stephon Diggs a little bit the year before because they were coming into a new offense. And then look what you know. They're great players, they're veterans, and they come in firing. Derek Carr will hopefully do the same thing. But another guy that I think will cannot, start to fire, continue to fire, bringing back one of my bold predictions and making it even bolder this year as we are turning up the spice. James Conner will be a top 5 running back this year. Not a super hot take, that's right around where he finished last year, but people have him right now outside the top 12 running backs, and I think that is ridiculous. He was the running back 5 overall with Chase Edmonds most of the year last year. And here's the biggest thing with Chase Edmonds. When Chase Edmonds played, Joe, last year, he averaged 12 touches per game with Conner. And James Conner, as injury-prone as he is, has still played at least 13 games in 4 out of 5 seasons. I think most of us right now would take our running back 2 to play at least 13 games and give an 80% chance at that. The lowest he's played is 10 games. I know he hasn't played the full, 16 or 17, but he's still been playing a lot of games every year. I think this offense will be very similar. There might be more targets for Conner, but I know they did bring in Marquise Brown, but Chase Edmonds leaves 53 targets behind for James Conner to pick up. And I don't think, Keontae Ingram or Eno Benjamin is going to be taking them away from a guy that they just gave a lot of money to.
No, Keontae Ingram is going to be an interesting deep league handcuff because I think he's going to, in the depth chart, he's going to go ahead of Eno Benjamin. I do believe that.
Yeah, I agree.
But right now, James Conner on FantasyPros and half point PPR is RB14. And I just think that's a little bit of disrespect. And especially when you're putting guys like, DeAndre Swift, who can't stay on the field ahead of him. It's like, I mean, I can understand some of the other names. Like, I get it. Aaron Jones has earned that. I understand that. I still love Javonte Williams. Leonard Fournette had a great year, has had, some great work under Brady, but still another year older. But Conner is a huge value. And as somebody last year who was very into the hero running back and then finding another guy late, I had a couple teams that had Derrick Henry and then later took a shot on James Conner. And who knew that Conner would be the guy that would kind of carry me through those teams that had great big wide receivers. And I'll tell you what, if you're going to give me Conner as the 14th running back off the board, yes, please. 100 times yes. I'll take him every day.
Exactly. I think him and Leonard Fournette are both big values last year. Both guys I'll be investing a ton in. James Conner, he's the man. But Joe, we've had, a little bit of salsa here. We've had some mild, we've had some medium, but this is the point where people can't handle it as much. This is where people start to get a little upset, a little hot and bothered, because we're really starting to turn up the heat with our final two bold predictions. Who is your bold prediction number 4?
Everyone wants to eliminate Jalen Waddle just because Tyreek Hill's around. I'm
Ooh.
not going to do that. So in full point PPR, that's the caveat. Full PPR, the guy who had 100 receptions last year is going to have more fantasy points than Tyreek Hill.
Wow.
And Tyreek Hill is the more explosive talent. There's no way around him. Jalen Waddle is a great wide receiver. Tyreek Hill is in a universe unto himself. However, he's in a universe with Tua Tagovailoa. And if Tua isn't the guy and they pivot to Teddy Bridgewater, it's not like Teddy Bridgewater is the greatest deep ball throwing quarterback that there is either. So the guy who really fits in terms of weekly floor, I mean, Tyreek Hill's still going to have some big Tyreek Hill moments, but even last year with Mahomes, only half of his games he finishes a wide receiver 1, 50% of the time. When I draft a wide receiver 1, I want him to be closer to 60 or 70. Like, I want him to be closer into that range. 50% just doesn't do it for me. And now you're making a significant downgrade at quarterback. Tyreek Hill is going to have some huge games. There's no doubt about that. And they will help facilitate the overall. But I think on a weekly basis, Jalen Waddle is going to be that guy instead that really contributes. And I think at the end of the day, we'll end up compiling a better overall point total because every week he's going to be part of that offense. And having a guy like Tyreek Hill around is only going to help because you're talking about single coverage. You're talking about Jalen Waddle working in the slot. You're talking about Jalen Waddle catching 100 plus balls. I think that's absolutely going to happen again this year. So Jalen Waddle, more PPR points than Tyreek Hill this year for the Miami Dolphins.
Oof, that is a spicy take. I got a little too much spice. Gotta go grab the milk in the fridge and start taking some. I don't know about that one. I mean, Tyreek Hill is still, I know he's been playing with Mahomes. He's probably one of the best deep ball quarterbacks, if not the best in the NFL. But Tyreek Hill has still been a top 8 wide receiver for the last 5 years. Only year he didn't was the year that he missed due to injury earlier in the season. But, Tyreek Hill is still Tyreek Hill. They made him the highest paid wide receiver of all time, when they drafted him for a reason. I think the ball is going to be going to his way early and often. I know he's not the same size or weight, as Deebo Samuel, but I think that Mike McDaniel is going to be scheming up some run plays for Tyreek Hill. I mean, I don't, think that, Tyreek Hill is going to be the wide receiver 1 this year, but I think he will at least outscore, Jalen Waddle, I believe, because Tua Tagovailoa, I know he's not known as a deep ball quarterback, but he was number 1 in the NFL in deep ball completion percentage last year, number 1 in red zone completion percentage.
It's because he only threw it 6 times.
He was probably 3 for 6, but the one thing I want to here is with Tyreek Hill that I believe that watching Tyreek Hill and watching a lot of Chiefs games because they were nationally televised, I know he didn't have as many wide receiver 1 finishes, but this wasn't Tyreek Hill of 3 years ago that was just go deep, run a post or a go route every play. I thought they used him a lot better in space, giving him the ball on screens a few times every game, and I think that Miami will use him similarly. So I'm going to have to push back on there, but I like the boldness. But what would you give percentage-wise?
Push back, and here's another piece I'm gonna have and debate back with you. The other thing about Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes is the improvisation. Is Patrick Mahomes' ability to keep a play alive and then make a play that nobody else can make, and then Tyreek Hill goes and runs with that ball. For a perfect example, right, in that last game against Buffalo, right, where Patrick Mahomes gets loose, hits Tyreek Hill with the ball, and then he cuts up to the right and runs up the sideline and goes past people. Those kind of plays are not going to be on the table in this Miami offense. I don't care who's running. I don't care what offensive coordinator, what head coach comes in. You don't have Patrick Mahomes making those moments happen. And I think those improvisational moments along with the deep ball things, those are all things that I'm not saying he should be drafted as a wide receiver 1. He absolutely should.
Yep.
And I'm just trying to, I guess, more remind everybody and shake them and say, hey, Jalen Waddle is really, really good. He was really good at Alabama. And he was my favorite wide receiver coming into this year after Jamar Chase. Those were the 2 guys for me. And I had all the shares of Jalen Waddle because they came dirt cheap. He was my wide receiver 4 on all 3 teams that I had that went to championships. Okay. So I'm telling you right now, just because Mike McDaniel's there, it's not going away just because Tyreek Hill showed up. If anything, he could be better, and Tyreek Hill can still be Tyreek Hill. It's just at the end of the day, when you don't have Patrick Mahomes attached to you, It's a very different version. It's just something we all have to come to terms with. And Miami's been known for making some stupid decisions, and one of them is paying Tyreek Hill as much as they are. I'm just telling you right now, it's not a good decision.
I agree with that. And you make it, you and your handsome self, Joe, you make it hard to disagree with me. I love Jalen Waddle as much as the next person. So anytime you're like a pro Jalen Waddle take, it's so hard for me to disagree. I still think that
this is more pro Jalen Waddle than negative Tyreek Hill.
I agree. And from that perspective, I agree that Jalen Waddle, I think, is undervalued right now. I think he is going to be better. I still think Tyreek is going to be the guy. They paid him for a reason. He's Tyreek Hill for a reason, and hopefully he'll continue. Hopefully they'll all, improve, and hopefully they'll make Tua look really good, but that obviously remains to be seen. But the last thing I will say with that I think is interesting, with the deep ball attempts and percentage, we saw how much better that Josh Allen looked, once they added a great deep threat in Stephon Diggs. I think when they add a really great deep threat in Tyreek Hill, I think they'll start to, get a little bit better in improving those. But obviously that remains to be seen. But I'm also turning up the heat. And this is a take that probably there's not many people out there are going to agree with me on this one, but I wholeheartedly believe in this player. I think that he's been screwed his entire life, and this is probably his best quarterback since high school. And he has. It's Allen Robinson. I think Allen Robinson will be a wide receiver 1 for the Rams. People forget and are so quick to forget, and this is Twitter and Fantasyland, Joe, that Allen Robinson was a top 10 wide receiver in 2019 and 2020. He was the wide receiver 81 last year, dealing with injuries, bad QB play, bad coaching, and a terrible offense. But Robert Woods, who I think is not as good as Allen Robinson, was a top 15 wide receiver the last 3 years under Sean McVay. He was on pace to be a wide receiver 1 before he got hurt. Robinson can play all over the field. And I think, again, people forget the fact that Woods and Kupp were both on pace to be wide receiver 1s before Woods got hurt last year. I think Allen Robinson is an upgrade. I think this team is still going to be throwing the ball a lot. I think Matthew Stafford is going to unlock Allen Robinson. He's not going to be better than Cooper Kupp. I'm not saying that, but I think that this offense has enough volume to go around, and I think these players are so talented that Allen Robinson will be a wide receiver 1 this year.
I hope you're right. I'd like you to be right. I like Allen Robinson as a player, and you're right. He's had a tough go. The problem is when you look at Allen Robinson, you're talking about a guy in his good years. He's getting 150 targets every year. I don't know, even in a prolific offense like this one, if they're going to give him 150 targets. I find that hard to believe. And I think that if it happens, then again, the volume is king, right? And look, I agree with drafting Allen Robinson, taking a shot when it's the right time. I think that Allen Robinson is a player that, has 2 paths. He can either go the route now of AJ Green and Julio Jones, where we all said, oh, look, he's moving on and he's got a fresh start at an advanced age. And the last couple of times we saw that, it has not worked out well. Now, some guys it does work out better for, but it's been a while since we've seen one. So to me, I am very, very careful here. I'm not jumping into this wide receiver 1 Allen Robinson. If he ended up as a 2, I would dance a jig and be incredibly excited about it. But 150 targets in this offense, considering how many Cooper Kupp got, that's going to be a tricky thing. So that is my only struggle there. So go ahead, push back, baby. Let's go.
But you need 150 targets when your quarterback is Christian Hackenberg, Mitchell Trubisky, or Nick Foles. When you don't need 100,
you forgot about Blake Bortles and all the other crap quarterbacks he played with. I'm even going back to the other years where he had 150. Back with the Jacksonville Jaguars, he had 150 in 2015 and 2016 too. So he's used to getting huge volume off of huge volume.
Agree.
I just think that, with the way McVay is in love with himself, I don't know if he'll be able to say, yes, that's definitely going to be the other way. Because you remember even the first 6 weeks of the season, Robert Woods was like persona non grata. People were freaking out because Robert Woods wasn't getting enough targets. Eventually they came back and they started to give him the football more and it started to even out. And then we all know Robert Woods got hurt. And then eventually Odell Beckham ended up kind of taking over that role. But look, I hope you're right. It would be a nice story, but I think as a wide receiver 1, that's asking a lot. As a wide receiver 2, I'll buy he has that upside, but not a 1.
I think it's fair, but like Robert Woods last year averaged 7.5 targets, like on a normal 16-game season, that's 120 targets. And I don't know about you, and let me just ask you this, and you can disagree here. Would you rather 120 targets from Matthew Stafford or 150 from Blake Bortles? That's what we're talking with. If he gets the exact same volume that Robert Woods did,
100%. But let's go through these names. Okay, here's I want you to find who's not in this group because you're putting Allen Robinson there. Cooper Kupp is, right?
Yep.
Justin Jefferson is, Jamar Chase is, Devonte Adams is, Stephon Diggs is, right? We're
Yep.
5 deep.
Yep.
Okay. Debo Samuel,
Yep.
let's just say for now he goes and he plays. Okay, so that's 6. Then you've got Tyreek Hill, Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb. Okay, are you putting him productivity-wise ahead of any of those guys?
I would put him over Mike Evans and Debo, personally. Call that a hot take.
Okay, Debo, I understand your concern, but that would be like a holdout.
Beat those guys. I'm not ranking him above it, but being bold here that he could get there. Sure. I think those are the guys that he outproduces.
I think it would take an injury for him to get past Mike Evans or Debo.
Okay.
Then Keenan Allen, I'm not putting him ahead of Keenan Allen. Fair. Keenan Allen has way too much respect for me. And then you get into this interesting conversation now where you have the volume guys like Deontay Johnson and Jalen Waddle. And then T. Higgins, A.J. Brown, Michael Thomas, Pittman, DK, like Amari Cooper is another guy that I think, if you told me Amari Cooper is going to finish as a wide receiver 1, okay. Because if Deshaun Watson plays 17 games, then I think the answer to that question is going to be a resounding yes.
Yep.
He's asked to leapfrog a lot of guys, and it's possible. But it's a fun conversation. I think this is a fun debate. I like it.
Either way, even if he's not going to be a wide receiver 1, I think he is the most underrated wide receiver in all of fantasy football. He's going outside, like right around the top 30 wide receivers in consensus rankings right now. I think he's the most underrated in all of football. I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong. Whether he's a wide receiver 1 or not, that will remain to be seen. But he is the best wide receiver value in drafts in the top 40 right now. And I will not stand or let go of that flag. But that is it. Spike debate for these number 2s. So what is it going to look like for our final bold prediction? That's not even the flag plant here. That's not even the flag plant I have for you today. But Joe, what is your final bold prediction for today?
Okay. What do Jameson Williams, Garrett Wilson, Drake London all have in common? What do they all have in common?
They're all first-round wide receivers.
What else do they all have in common?
They're all produced really well in college.
Yes, and they're all going to play with substandard quarterbacks this year.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yep.
All of them. Now, when we're trying to look for wide receiver success in the rookie class, Marcus Mariota, Zach Wilson, Jared Goff, those names don't really come to mind.
Yep.
So when we're looking for a guy who can really step up and have an impact in a rookie class in redraft leagues, Skye Moore has the path. Skye Moore tape is really good. I watched him play in college games, not just like the highlight tape. I actually watched him play. His combine was terrific. Everything he does is smooth. To me, Juju Smith-Schuster, okay, maybe he can rebound, maybe he can't. MVS is a drop machine, and we have Travis Kelce getting older. If there's one guy, because again of the quarterback, that could really step up, and Byron Pringle's not there anymore. There's a lot less. Mecole Hardman is old news. Enough with him. We're not going to make him happen anymore. There's a real path for Skye Moore if things work well. And the draft capital they used on him, it suggests that they knew exactly what they were doing and who they were getting. There's a real chance that we look up and the most productive wide receiver isn't Treylon Burks, even though they want to feed him the ball, or so they say, because they don't really throw the ball that much. We just talked about that anyway, even though the good years and the down years, forget it. And all the other guys we're talking about all happen to be paired with some pretty bad quarterbacks. And then I'm going to say Christian Watson's got a great quarterback. Okay, but how's that all going to work out? I'm still not 100% sold there. So Skye Moore has an opportunity. Again, I'm not saying he's going to, but there's a path there because of the offense he plays in, the offensive ecosystem, the quarterback, the coach, that he could be the most productive 2022 rookie wide receiver in terms of stats at the end of the year when we're looking up.
Did you take my phone, and go through it before we had this episode? No. Because I did not. I just posted a TikTok video as we began recording saying that Skye Moore was the biggest steal, arguably the biggest steal of the entire draft. He was he had a 99th percentile target share coming out his last year in college. And the biggest thing that I love about him, beyond the situation, beyond the talent, beyond the role that he will be put into, and we all know reception perception. We all love Matt Harmon and how well wide receivers get open. He charted the top 12 wide receivers in this class. Skye Moore was number 1 in beating zone coverage and number 2 behind Chris Olave in beating man. Not only is a really good talent in a good role with the best quarterback in the NFL and the best play caller in the NFL, he's also the best rookie at getting open overall out of any wide receiver. I love this take in Skye Moore. I want to push back. I want to disagree, but you must have had my phone or got into it somehow because
Just great minds think alike, Alex.
great
That's
minds
what
think
at the end of
alike.
the day.
Exactly. Maybe I should have worn my bald calf to really have the great minds think alike here. That would have elevated me a little bit, but I think Skye Moore is a huge steal. I want to disagree, but I can't hear. But where we may disagree and have maybe one final battle before we get into this flag plant is my final bold prediction. You thought Allen Robinson, wide receiver 1, was bold. This is even bolder, and I wholeheartedly believe in it. And that is that Trey Lance will be a top 3 QB in fantasy this year. Yeah, you heard me. He will be a top 3 QB. 15 plus points in all 3 games he played at least a half in. He's got insane weapons with George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and this is Deebo Samuel staying in this scenario. He has a top tier offensive line, 10.3 rush attempts per game in his 3 starts last year. But the biggest thing that makes me believe in him is what we saw year after year for the last 3 years. We saw Lamar Jackson do it in his second year. We saw Kyler Murray do it in his second year. And we saw Jalen Hurts as the QB1 in fantasy football for the first 11 weeks before he got hurt with his high ankle sprain, with some of the worst weapons in the NFL. So imagine if you give this rushing quarterback that no one has seen and no one has real film on, and you give him 3 of the best yards after the catch weapons in the NFL in Ayuk, Samuel, and Kittle, and you unlock him like the 49ers are going to unlock him with a top-tier offensive line, a top-tier play caller, you get Trey Lance as a top 3 quarterback in fantasy football this year. He is going to break fantasy football. All the beat reporters were talking about some of this throws and things that he was doing in camp last year. I think he's going to be what Patrick Mahomes was behind Alex Smith. Maybe not necessarily talent, but in fantasy football, he is going to break the game this year. How do you feel?
I like Trey Lance a lot. I was very big on Trey. I thought Trey Lance should have been the second quarterback selected. I was very, very clear about that last year. I thought it was Trevor Lawrence. I thought it was Trey Lance. And then I thought it was Fields. And then I thought it was Mac Jones. And I thought it was Zach Wilson. I was Zach Wilson to me was this whole other tier. He was more of a project, I thought, than other people did. It's not impossible. The range of outcomes you're talking about, it's not impossible. Because even if you still put Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes at the top, I mean, Herbert has really, I think, grown into something special. So is Joe Burrow. But from a fantasy standpoint, they do lack a little bit of that, again, that mobility factor, right? So it depends on Lamar Jackson's health. Kyler Murray seems to be disenfranchised. He's already got his favorite weapon, DeAndre Hopkins, missing first 6 games of the season. That does not help. There's every opportunity for this to happen. But I still think you've got to temper your expectations because there's also a downside to this. And the downside is they roll in this year with Jimmy Garoppolo again. And I know that's something that people don't want to hear me say. And I don't want to say it. I hate myself for saying it. Believe me, they might just be stuck with that situation. And I just don't think they're going to cut him. I think they look at it as, Garoppolo has got us there. The team loves Garoppolo. The players love him. I think you're 100% right from a fantasy perspective. It's that same thing. And if I just wrote this in the Black Book too this week when I was writing up the quarterbacks, because I do the QBs every year. And I wrote about Jalen Hurts and I wrote about Trey Lance. And all my reservations about Jalen Hurts were because, at the end of the day, the arm talent's not there.
Yep.
All the reservations I had last year about Jalen Hurts were wrong because he still finished regardless as QB8, right, overall.
Yep.
And all the reservations I had about Jalen Hurts, I don't have about Trey Lance because he has the arm talent. That's there. It's just a matter of, can he get the reps and can he play? And if he does, and if he starts from day one, there's a chance for him to get into that top 5. You ain't wrong. Top 3 would be really something, but top 3 would also require somebody or 1 or 2 other guys unraveling.
Yep.
And that's possible. But, let's not forget about that old fart Tom Brady, too, who's pretty good throwing the football still.
Not bad. The other thing I want to say is that if Trey Lance starts, like 15 or 16 games this year, he's a lock for QB8 or better. I mean, this is my favorite stat last year, and this is my argument. I told you this stat when you came on my show with my flag plant last year with Jalen Hurts. 19 of 22 quarterbacks that have averaged at least 4.5 rush attempts per game going into last year. 19 out of 22 were top 8 QBs in points per game. The 3 that didn't, 2012 Tim Tebow, 2014 Colin Kaepernick, and 2020 Cam Newton. Trey Lance was better than all 3 of those guys, has better weapons than all 3 of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
So I think if Trey Lance starts, he is an automatic top 8 QB. And that's what I was saying about Jalen Hurts, and we were right. And if he has the mobility,
Well, you were right. I was wrong. You were right, not we.
either way,
I was wrong about Jalen Hurts. You were right, but my concern was that at some point in time he was going to lose that job because of the other stuff. And then when you go from being a effective fantasy quarterback but a bad real life quarterback, and you're on the bench, you're a zero. And that was something that in single quarterback formats, I didn't mind taking him. In Superflex, it was a little bit more dangerous because you really needed him to be the thing. You know, you could take him and then take Kirk Cousins and then see whichever panned out. And if you had both, you were fine at quarterback and you had good value. It's in the Superflex formats where, especially last year, where some of the, you know, some weird stuff happened with the quarterback position at certain times. And then, my God, the playoffs and COVID and all that stuff, that madness that we went through.
Yep.
I got to tell you, like, there's every opportunity for you to be 100% right on this one because he has so many more assets and attributes and positives to look for on the 49ers than the Eagles did in terms of what they were capable of as an offense.
Yep. And I completely agree. And I think it's ultimately going to come down to that if the 49ers believe in Trey Lance like I do, he will take over and he will be the guy because he adds such a different dynamic that Jimmy Garoppolo can't. They know that it's almost impossible for them to win a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo. They had the perfect run and they still didn't win. And they had a great run last year and they still didn't win. I think if Trey Lance is that guy for them, he is going to be that guy that can give them that run that Jimmy Garoppolo can't. I hope they trade him so we don't have to worry about this, but I do agree. If Jimmy Garoppolo sticks around, it can't happen, and that does worry me, but I'm going to believe in Trey Lance just like I believed in Jalen Hurts, and, you know, let's hope he proved me right. But that is our bold predictions today, but you know, sticking with those bold predictions, we still have a flag plant for you, Joe. It's been a pleasure to have you on this show, but we have one final question. The question of all questions, what is your 2022 flag plant, the boldest prediction that you believe in?
Despite the fact that Melvin Gordon has returned to Denver, it's the Javonte Williams show, baby.
Oh,
Melvin Gordon is now a supporting character. Okay. I've seen already people took Javonte Williams from top 3, top 5, dropped him all the way down to 12. It hurts my heart. I don't like it. And I'm telling you right now, I understand Melvin Gordon is still around and I'm understanding he's still going to work. But if you watched last year and those moments that Javonte Williams had, it's pretty clear who the best back is in that backfield. And Melvin Gordon is another year older. And Melvin Gordon does have a history of getting hurt, especially as the season goes on. So Javonte Williams, still a top 5 running back, despite the fact Melvin Gordon is still around. And it's also based on the fact now you got a real quarterback. So a real quarterback who can move the chains. This is a team that's going to, I think, have to play faster. And I think this is a team that, you know, like I said, that West is going to be super competitive. And if you want to compete, you're going to have your best guys on the field. And your best guy right now is Javonte Williams.
Really? You really think that he can be top 5 with Melvin Gordon? Melvin Gordon was awesome.
Yeah, he was. That was last year. Stop living in the past, Alex.
That's
the problem with you old people like you. You know, me, I'm young. I like to think about the future. You like to live in the past. Old guys like you.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to believe in this, and I want to end off on a happy note where we hug and we walk off into the sunset.
That's okay, man.
We still might, but no other handcuff running back in all of fantasy football besides Kareem Hunt, you know, with Nick Chubb, has someone as talented as Melvin Gordon, who is a Pro Bowler, a guy that's played at least 12 games in all 7 seasons that he's played in the NFL, a guy that does not get hurt. And George Patton, the GM of this team, said that these guys are going to share the workload. Melvin Gordon's going to help us win games. And he's not Marlon Mack, you know, where Jonathan Taylor was destined to take him over. He's not Jamal Williams, who I think that Swift was destined to take him over, leading to 8th in snap share last year. I just don't see a world where Javonte Williams gets enough work unless Melvin Gordon gets hurt to be a top 5 running back. Do I think that he can sneak in the running back one, where he gets a lot of touchdowns? Sure. But I don't think it's possible to have a handcuff running back that plays at least 30 or 40% of the snaps like that, and you can still finish in the top 5 unless your name is Austin Eckler and you catch like near 100 passes.
Well, that's okay that you disagree. I think it's healthy to disagree. I look at Melvin Gordon and I say, is Melvin Gordon going to get 200 attempts in this offense? I don't think so. He got 200 last year under Vic Fangio. It's a very different offense with a very different quarterback. This is going to be a much different offense. And I think now that Hackett's there, I think that you're going to get a much, an offense is going to be, let's say, if you take away 50 of those carries and give them to Javonte Williams, I don't think there's replacement in the other carry. I don't think all of a sudden it's like, it's not a shift where we split the 400 between the two of them last year evenly. I think you're going to take 50 away from Melvin Gordon, and then there's just going to be a suppression underneath that. Melvin Gordon's going to be around. Melvin Gordon can be useful. But at the end of the day, I'm sorry, the key word here, you were saying 7 seasons. Running backs tend to break down after a certain period of time. You can go back to last year's Ezekiel Elliott show for a lesson about that.
So do you think so? Melvin Gordon, for last thing we'll finish with this. Melvin Gordon averaged 15 touches a game last year. So you're saying that if you add those 5 touches and you give them to Javonte Williams, who also averaged right about exactly the same in touches per game last year, that would bump up Javonte Williams to 20 touches a game. So you believe that if he gets 20 touches a game next year, that's a top 5 running back?
I do in this offense. I think it's very possible, especially because we're going to get more attrition of RB1s getting hurt and some of the other, I mean, how many times do you have to get kicked in the nuts by Christian McCaffrey and some other guys? Like, I'm sorry. Like, you look at RB1 and you look at the attrition of injuries, it's about health. And I think it's a good thing in a way that Melvin Gordon's there, because the first 6 weeks, again, might be some frustrations, but I think over time, Javonte Williams will win out because of that. And as the season wears on and other defenses wear on, he will be fresher than other running backs. Okay. And I think that's something that's very important. And I think that's something you're going to see again. And again, it's not Melvin Gordon's going to be useless. Certainly one of the better handcuffs to have, but that 50-50 split I think you saw, I think it's going to be more like a 70-30 kind of a deal in this one. And if so, it's good for Javonte Williams because it keeps him playing every week. And I do think somewhere between, 18 carries and about, 3 catches or targets a game, it's very possible for him. And Melvin Gordon will touch the ball a bunch here and there. Certain game plans, sure, it's going to be a little different, but they're going to be behind. And you want the explosive player. Melvin Gordon's not explosive anymore.
That's fair. I have a hard time seeing him surpassing, your Jonathan Taylor, Eckler, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, DeAndre Swift, Leonard Fournette, James Conner versus Javonte Williams. We'll have to put a little bet on of who's going to do better next year. That will be the debate. But Joe, it has been an absolute pleasure, debating fantasy, talking fantasy, agreeing, disagreeing, all of that under the sun. It's been a pleasure to have you back on the show, and I hope to have you on sometime in the future again. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Before we go, you're the author of the Black Book. You do so many wonderful things in this fantasy land that we call fantasy football. Please plug us, anything that you want to share at all. And what do the listeners need to know before we head out of here?
Well, what the listeners need to know is that Alex Caruso is a fun dude to come and hang out and talk football with. And it's always a pleasure to be on with you, buddy. You can follow me on the Twitter machine at Joe Pisapia 17. New Fantasy Black Book will be out on June 1st. Fingers crossed on Amazon again this year. Obviously, you can check me out on FantasyPros, hosting all the podcasts, all the shows on baseball and football side there. And, of course, on the weekends, doing television still for Sports Grid. So I am everywhere. It's easier to not find me, as I always say. It's easier to avoid me if you can.
Absolutely. But please follow him at Joe Pisapia 17. The last thing I want to say for the listeners, go get the Fantasy Black Book when it comes out. I'm someone that does a lot of content. I read a lot of things. I'm always listening to podcasts and things like that. And I figured, how much is a fantasy football book going to help me? But I love Joe. I'm a supporter of Joe, and I bought one. And man, oh man, was I surprised and impressed with the level of the Fantasy Football Black Book. If you are hesitating, go buy it. I'd spend hours upon hours upon hours each and every day, and I still felt like I learned so much from every single chapter. Please go buy the Fantasy Football Black Book when it comes out. But Joe, it's been a pleasure to have you on today. And listeners, it's been a pleasure talking football with you. Thank you so much for listening to the Fresh Fantasy Podcast and enjoying more episodes with great guests like Joe. But as always, please leave a review. You guys already know what to do. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.